office politics, stereotypes, and drunk teens. This isn't the Young Democrats of America's annual camping trip. This is Cabin in the Woods. Cabin in the Woods is a 2012 horror comedy and directorial debut for Drew Goddard. He also wrote the script with the geek messiah that is Joss Whedon. Goddard and Whedon are both masters of comedy and dialogue, and between the two of them have created some of the best TV and movies our geek asses have ever seen. We're talking Buffy, Angel, Alias, Lost, Daredevil, Cloverfield, Firefly, Serenity, The Avengers, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Dollhouse, and Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog. If that list of legit geek street cred does not get you on board and excited to see this film, you have severe issues. The film has a great cast. Chris Hemsworth, whom you guys know from Thor, In the Heart of the Sea, Red Dawn, and a lot more. You've got Kristen Connolly from The Bay, Zoo, and House of Cards. You've got Frank Kranz from Dollhouse, Bloodsucking Bastards, and The Village. You've got Jesse Williams from Grey's Anatomy, and of course, Detroit Become Human. Richard Jenkins, who's still one of my favorite actors of all time. He's been in so much stuff, it's insane, like Let Me In, Jack Reacher, and Step Brothers. Always hilarious Bradley Whitford from Get Out, The West Wing, and Billy Madison. Amy Acker, who is Fred in Angel. She was also an Alias in Suits. Brian White from The S.H.I.E.L.D., Colony, and Fighting. So like I said, this is an amazing ensemble cast with a lot of great work to their credit. The score is by David Julian, who did Memento, The Prestige, and Insomnia. Editing was done by Lisa Lassick, who did Serenity and The Avengers. Cinematography was by Peter Deming, who did Twin Peaks, Drag Me to Hell, and one of my favorite sports movies of all time, Mystery Alaska. So a lot of great people in front of and behind the camera. So the summary sounds like every other horror movie, and that's the point of this film, except things aren't what they seem and they need to survive long enough to find a way out. And that's all I can really say here, because anything more would spoil this movie. So as you guys know, when I talk about movies, I talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's get to the good. This movie takes every horror trope that you can imagine and flips them on their head. This is the stuff that normally frustrates you and makes you say, why the hell are these people doing this? What kind of dumbass decisions are they making? This is just going to get them killed. And it makes them a strength. And if you are paying attention to this film, you see so many Easter eggs that kind of call back to so many horror films that came before it that all really influenced the making of this thing. Way too many Easter eggs to name in this video because we can only talk so much about this film. There's a ton of videos on YouTube. Just type in Easter eggs, Cabin in the Woods, and you'll see a lot of cool stuff. This is one of those horror movies that you only get maybe once every 5 to 10 years, if not longer. We're talking about Scream, Tucker and Dale, Babadook, It Follows, Get Out, A Quiet Place, and The Descent. This is a horror film that goes about things in a very different way, a very unique way. You have your typical character archetypes, but what's interesting is the way that they interact with one another, what happens to them, and how some of them aren't actually what they seem. If you're paying attention to the film from the beginning to the end, some of these roles that you think people aren't actually the case. So the big dumb jock who's only worried about sex and having fun, who is supposed to be Chris Hemsworth, isn't actually him. I think it's more Jesse Williams, because if you look at the movie from the beginning, Chris Hemsworth is recommending different books for people to read. Even Kristen Connolly, the one who is virtuous, she actually is not. To me, she's the fool. Frank Kranz is the virgin, because he's the one who thinks about things in a calm and smart way and kind of defies the expectations of the audience and of those he's surrounded by. So not only does it kind of subvert what horror tropes usually are and what happens in a film, it kind of changes over time and tricks the audience. So you think someone is one thing when they're actually the other. For the people who are just watching it on the surface level, they're not going to catch a lot of that stuff. And that's why I think this movie is so smart. Yes, okay, it is lots of comedy and raunchy stuff and violence and gore and everything, but there's a layer of intelligence here because of Goddard and Whedon's writing that kind of elevates it to something more. There's some really strong performances here in every emotional range that you can think of. You have the big gut-busting funny stuff. You've got some moments that really shock and surprise you. And a lot of the times while this is happening, you really feel like you're on board with them and you're really rooting for them to make it. And at the same time, there's this whole other sub-story that's happening, and they have a mission, and it is for a good reason, and you kind of want them to succeed too. I'm not going to say what or why, because again, that would spoil the movie. And it even has a ton of metaphors that talk about, consumerism and what filmgoers want and what Hollywood is. There's a lot to this movie that, if you're really paying attention attention, you really think about it, you are very rewarded. And if you just want to watch it as like a dumb, funny horror movie, you can do that too. There's some really clever twists in this movie. I don't normally get surprised by horror films. They're usually pretty predictable, and almost always the ending is pretty dumb and it's ruined. At every turn, there were surprises that sometimes really made me happy, made me laugh, and there were a couple that really bummed me out. So for it to happen so many times in this movie, I really, really enjoyed it because of that. Now, from a filmmaking perspective, every facet of this movie is top notch, from the editing and the sound design to the mixing, cinematography. It's just really, really good. The dialogue and humor is so very important to this film. A lot of people are comparing it to like Evil Dead 2. It's not doing the same thing. So comparing the two is really apples and oranges. There are some really good, strong, kick-ass practical effects in here. Gore, the wounds, the deaths, the violence is just awesome. And that's just not for us, the audience, to enjoy. That's part of the plot. It's very integral to the plot, actually. And there are some pretty great CGI effects in here too that you'll really like. But I'm trying to keep it as general as possible because I don't want to spoil stuff with the different characters and the storylines and all that. But with all that being said, let's talk about the bad. Some of the CGI is pretty rough. Then again, this movie's almost 7 years old. It doesn't take you out of the film very much. It doesn't ruin the film for you. So it's not too much of a thing, but it does, stand out because everything else was done so well. A lot of people went in expecting this movie to be one thing, and it was something completely different. And that pissed a lot of people off, which is why this movie is very divisive. Some people really love it. Some people really hate it. But I'm of the mindset that I really enjoy when someone subverts genre conventions and people's expectations, and they make something different than what the audience wanted or what they figured. And I think a lot of times it works out for the better, like in this case. And The Last Jedi. Yes, I said it. There's this rapid fire like scattergun feel to the movie when it comes to the pacing and the editing. I enjoy it, but it can be disorienting, and some people I've heard, were like, well, you're here, but then you're here. How much time has passed? What's going on? What happened in between? One place I really think they dropped the ball in this film, aside from the marketing of it, was they shied away from a lot of the kills and the violence and the gore and all that kind of stuff, I think to keep it safe as possible for the general audience, when really this is a genre film made for horror buffs. That being said, I think they should have went all in with the violence and the gore and the titties. This movie is a social commentary in addition to being a great horror and a great comedy. So if you're going to talk about it, go all in, baby. This is one of those movies that was just done so well. People that dislike it are in one of two camps. First, you've got those who expected one thing. Maybe they wanted just some like kids in a cabin having sex and getting murdered movie. And you get that a little bit, but it's not what you think. So I can see them being a little bit frustrated. And on the other hand, you're going to have those people, no matter how good something is and no matter how much everybody loves it, they're going to say they don't like it or they hate it or they never watched it. You have that one friend who's like, oh, I never liked Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad. The ones who are like, I've never even watched an episode, and they wear it like some badge of honor. In my case, you'll usually say like, why not? Why haven't you given it a chance? Just because a lot of people like it doesn't mean it's not good. Now, I know this review has been a lot more general than most of my reviews, and I didn't get into as many details as I normally would, but that is for a reason. I don't want to spoil the joy of this film for those who have not seen it. And there are a lot of people who haven't seen this film. So for me, this is one of those once in a great while genre-defying and defining films that really set a mark that a lot of people have tried to follow, most unsuccessfully. Not only did it not disappoint veteran horror film lovers like myself, it actually surprised us and gave us something unique, something that we grew to love. With all that being said, what is the score? Drum roll, please. 8 out of 10.